How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chaf, Daf 20 of Mesechta Avodah Zarah. Friends, your friends, today is a cool Daf. We learn a mishnah. We go mishnah to mishnah. What's cool about today's Daf? Well, we learn about can you sell to pagans things that are connected to the ground? You have to disconnect them first. Whatever. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of a technical thing, but it's going to lead to some interesting discussions about, about commenting on the beauty of pagans, about giving gifts to ger toshavs, to ovdei kochavim. We're going to get to the famous beraisa of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, the beraisa that the Messilat Yesharim is based on, right? The Torah, Messilat Zehirus, Messilat Zrizus, etc., etc., etc. So that's going to be on today's daf. We saw it, of course, in mesechta Shkalim, but we're going to see it again now for a second time in mesechta Avodah Zarah. So we have a very awesome daf today. Let us do it. Okay, we're going to start on daf Yutes Omid Beis at the Mishnah, or 4 lines from the bottom. So interestingly, you skip the first half of the Mishnah according to Tosfos, because there's a funny kind of. So basically, actually, skip the first half until Ein Mochrin, right? It's 3 lines from the bottom of Yutes Amud Beis, the last word on the line. Ein Mochrin loim b'mechuber lakarka. So says the tanna kamma that you may not sell to an oved kochavim. I think this is probably specific in Eretz Yisrael, that we're going to get to a machlekes. I think it must be. Is it on tomorrow's daf? It's on tomorrow's daf about Eretz Yisrael, Chutz La'aretz, Syria. But anyways, let's assume that we're talking about Eretz Yisrael. Do not sell things of the kochavim that are connected to the ground. Because, okay, as we're going to get into the Gemara, that we don't sell to the kochavim property in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore don't sell them, let's say trees, for example, that are still connected to the ground. But if you want to, cut down the tree and sell lumber or something, so it's fine. Rabbi Yehuda Omer mocher al menas lakuts. Rabbi Yehuda is a little bit more lenient. He says, well, you could sell the tree which is connected to the ground so long as it is under the condition that it will be cut down. That the sale is under the condition that it will be cut down. Says the Gemara, minanimili, how do we know this, that we don't sell things that are connected to the ground to oivdei kochavim? Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, the Pasuk says lo secho name, which I guess technically means don't have mercy on them. Lo sitilem chanoyo bakarka, don't give them any kind of encampment, any kind of entrenchment in the land, in the land itself, right? To encamp there, to settle it. Hi lo secho name miboyle le dehachi kamma rachmana lo sitin lem chen. But the Gemara says, wait, but lo secho name is to teach lo sitin lem chen. As Rashi says, shelo yomer kamma oved kochavim zenoya. The person should say, wow, that is a very beautiful looking oved kochavim. Don't give them chen, don't give them grace. So imken lemekra lo sechunim. Well, it should say if it was only teaching, don't give them chen, don't comment on their beauty. So then it should say lo sichunam. My lo sichanem, shmamina tarte. It's both. Yeah, don't comment on how beautiful that oved kochavim is, but also do not give them chanoya bakarka. Ve'akatmi boile doch yom rachmone lo sitin loim matnes chinam. Right, like chen, like lo sichonim, like chinam. Don't give gifts to ovdei kochavim. But again, imkein lemakra lo sichinam. If it was only to teach, don't give them gifts, then it should be lo sichinam. My lo sichonim shmamina kulhu. Lo sichonim includes all of the possibilities. Do not give them chanoya bakarka. Do not comment on how beautiful they are. Do not give them gifts. All of that is included in lo sichonim tanna. We also learn in a beraisa like this, lo sichonim, lo sitein loem chanoya bakarka. Do not give them an encampment in the land. Do not comment on their beauty. Do not give them freebies. Do not give them gifts. Now says the Gemara that actually this concept of do not give gifts to the Ovdei Kochavim is actually a machlokes tanoim. Desanya is one of the beraisa lo sochlu kol nivela. Do not eat nivela. Do not eat nivela. Nivela is, of course, meat that has not been properly slaughtered. Give it to a ger toshav. A ger toshav is somebody who is not Jewish, but abides by the Sheva Mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So if you have nivela, so it's not kosher, so Yidden cannot eat it, but give it, right? What is it? It says give it as a gift to a ger toshav, and he can eat it. Oh, alternatively, machur lenachri, sell it to a nachri, which I guess is not a ger toshav, I guess an oved kochavim. So you can sell it to an oved kochavim. Don't give it as a gift, but sell it. But now, says the Gemara, this is not the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Well, all I know, if I go based on the pashit pshat of the pasuk, is give it as a gift to a ger toshav, or sell it to a ovid kochavim. Lager b'mechira minayin. How do I know that I can also sell it to a ger toshav? I don't have to give it as a gift. I can sell it to a ger toshav. Tamlomer titnena o machor. Right. If you look at the pasuk, what does the pasuk say? Lager asher b'shecha titnena va'achala o machor. If you read the simple pshat of the pasuk, it means either give it to the ger that's in your midst, and he can eat it. Oh, alternatively, machor lenachri, you could sell it to an oved kocham. But if you get a little bit creative in where to put the pronunciation, the grammar, what's it called where you put like the commas and stuff like that? Where you put the commas and stuff. So if you're creative with that, you could say, or alternatively, you can sell it to the ger. And similarly, how do we know that to an oved kochavim you can give it as a gift? This is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Where am I? Where am I? Okay, where am I? And how do I know that you can even give it as a gift in oved kochavim? Tamulomar titnena va'achala o machor lenochri. Again, if you get creative with the commas and stuff, you could read the pasuk lager sheb'shecha titnena, and then it says, right, so titnena va'achala o machor lenochri. You can either give it as a gift or sell it to a nochri. So be'etzem, the point being that if you get creative with the commas and stuff, so then I feel like it's called punctuation. Well, did I say punctuation as one of the options earlier? Maybe I said pronunciation. Punctuation, I think, is probably the right. The equivalent, it's probably a synonym for commas and stuff. Wait, but now I forgot it again. No, it's not punctuation. Punctuation is synonymous with commas and stuff. Punctuation. Okay. English words. Punctuation. So if you get creative with the punctuation in the verse, you can kind of punctuate it creatively to teach that to a ger toshav you can either gift it or sell it, and the same for an oved kochavim you can either gift it or sell it. Nimtza'ata omer echad ger ve'echad oved kochavim. So we see that whether we're talking about a ger or we're talking about an oved kochavim, ben b'nesina ben b'mechir de've'mer. Whether you can either give it or you can sell it right, to either the ger toshav or the oved kochavim. Thus is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda, Devarim kichtavan. Says Rabbi Yehuda, meh. We take the verse in its simple reading as we had simply read it earlier. Lager b'nesinav la'oved kochavim b'mechira. That to a ger toshav, nevela is given as a gift, is gifted, and to an oved kochavim, nevela is sold. Yeah, did I want to say anything about that? I don't know. Oh yeah. What I did want to say is that so we see that it's taka in machloikes tanoim about can you give a gift to an oved kochavim. Rabbi Meir says yes. Rabbi Yehuda says no. That's what I wanted to say. Now, says the Gemara, Shapir ka'am Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara says, well, Rabbi Meir taka had a very compelling and creative interpretation. The Gemara, it sounds like it's saying like it's kind of convinced by Reb Meir's creative and interesting interpretation. Rabbi Yehuda Amalach, however, Rabbi Yehuda will reply to Reb Meir and say, Isalka daitech kedika Amar, Reb Meir, that if it is like Reb Meir is saying that you can either gift or sell both to a ger toshav as well as a oved kochavim, well, in that case, lichtav rachmana titnena v'chala u machor. Right, the pasuk, right? Oh lamali. The pasuk says, right, titnena, right, lager sheb'shiracha titnena v'chala o machor l'nachri. It says or give it to a nochri. So meaning if it's like Reb Meir saying that it's both, that there's a possibility of gifting as well as selling, it should say titnena u machor, not o machor, right? O means or. U means and. So if we're saying that there's both the possibility of gifting and selling, well then it should say u machor, but it says o machor. So shmamina l'dvarim kichsavim also. So Rabbi Yehuda argues that means that means that it's either or, it's or, it's not and. It's for the simple interpretation that gift it to a ger toshav or sell it to a oved kochavim. Reb Meir, how Reb Meir would respond, would retort. Very interesting. Reb Meir says, look, if it would say lager sheb'sharecha tochalena titnena v'achala u'machor l'nachri, well, then I wouldn't know if there is a priority. I would think that I have a choice. I can either give it to the ger toshav or to the oved kochavim. There's no kind of priority, right? In computer programming, you can get into some technicalities, but let's just say, at least in certain languages, you have an or statement, which is generally like two pipes, right? Two lines next to each other. What that means, again, maybe different languages interpret it differently, but I'm just gonna, I think at least in Ruby, I think JavaScript is the same thing. Basically what it means is evaluate the first statement. If it's true, so then stop right there. Don't move on to the or, don't move on to the second part of the or statement. Right? If it's false, so then evaluate the second part of the statement and see if that evaluates to true. So basically, Rabbi Meir is making a similar argument. He's the right, computer programming or statements are based on the shita of Rabbi Meir. Now, when it says oh, it's to give priority. It's saying first you evaluate whether there's a possibility to give the nevela to a ger toshav. If the answer is true, so then stop right there and give it to the ger toshav. If not, so then evaluate the continuation of the next part of the statement, which is, well, maybe there is an oved kochavim to give the nevela to. And that is what that is what the O is coming to do, right? To give priority first to the oved, to the ger toshav. However, Rabbi Yehuda responds, Rabbi Yehuda came to ger ata mitzuva lach yesei However, Rabbi Yehuda argues that there is a mitzvah le'achayos, I guess to keep alive, the a gertoshav, which is not the case by an oved kochavim. So because there's an inherent mitzvah lachayos as the gertoshav, so therefore, of course, priority goes to the gertoshav. I don't need the or statement, to give priority to the gertoshav. He already inherently has priority, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is to read the pasuk simply, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, gift to the gertoshav, sell to the oved kochavim. Okay. Now we had said earlier, we had said earlier, do not give them chen. Don't say how beautiful this ovedes kochavim is, or this oved kochavim is. So now, misayed le Rab, this supports Rab. The Rab says, Osur lo adam sheyemar, it is forbidden for one to say, Kame noye ovedes kochavim zoi. It's forbidden for somebody, for a yid, to say, wow, that is a very beautiful ovedes kochav. Maybe we have a contradiction. That he was on a step on Har Boys. Now, my gut is to say that this must have been Hillel's grandson. No, Hillel's great grandson, right? The son of Rabbi Gamliel Azokin, as opposed to the son of Rabbi Gamliel, right? Okay, I think I mentioned this recently, right? Hillel, the elder, he had a son Shimon, who had a son Rabbi Gamliel Azokin, who had a son Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. I think this must be the Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. I think that this Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Gamliel Azokin, I think was maybe the last Nasi, I think, during the Beis HaMikdash, I think. His son was Rabbi Gamliel, like from Yavne, and then his son was Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, the father of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, and then, of course, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, Rebbe. So my assumption is this is the son of Rabbi Gamliel Azokin. Anyway, so Ma'aser B'Shimon Gamliel al gabe Mila behar haboyis, who was on a step on Har Haboyis. And he saw a ovedes kochavim, very, 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 very beautiful. And he says, how, I guess, great are your, and how, I don't know, Rabu. How do you define Rabu? It's always, I guess, in the context of like how extraordinary are your creatures, Hashem. Rabbi Kiva, Ra Ashes Turnus Rufus Arosha. Also Rabbi Kiva, who saw the wife of the evil Turnus Rufus. I believe we have Shivasa B'Tammuz coming up. I believe. Was it not Turnus Rufus who, did he burn the Sefer Torah on Shivasa B'Tammuz? Let's look that up. I think it was a Gemara in Tainus, probably, right? You have to look that up. Rabbi Kiva saw the wife of Turnus Rufus, Rak Sachak Uvacha, and Rabbi Kiva spat, laughed, and cried. Rak, he spat, because she came from a putrid drop of semen. Sachak dad sida de megaira vinosivla, and he laughed because he knew that in the future she was going to convert to Judaism and marry him. So he was laughing about that, Bacha, and he cried, Daishufar Bali Afra, that she was so beautiful, and yet that beauty was ultimately going to be buried in the ground. So the shaila is, on the one hand, Rav is saying that it's forbidden to say, he says, also Adam Shem Kamanoya Ovedes Kochavim, and yet we see Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Akiva commenting on beautiful women, Ovedes Kochavim, of those Kochavimos. The Rabbi do Yehuda Kamode. So Rav responds, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Akiva were not like, just sitting around looking at women. They noticed beauty and they thanked Hashem, right? As it says, right? The Omer Mar Haroya Brias Tovas, a person who sees beautiful creations. Omer Baruch Shekacha Bar Ba'olamo. So they weren't just looking at women. They saw a beautiful person, and they gave praise to God about it. Right? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, "Marabu Masecha Hashem." Right? So they were praising God for creating beautiful creatures. That's what they were doing. But I don't understand why were they allowed. It's not allowed to just look at women. Person shouldn't be looking at beautiful women. And even if she is unmarried. And one should not be looking at a married woman, even if she is, I guess, not a person that one would instinctually say, she's married, under no circumstances. And also, a person should not look at the colorful garments of a woman, as we're going to learn about more in a minute, but basically meaning, even if just the clothing of a woman that you know and is a particularly beautiful woman, and she's not wearing the clothing right now, it's even just hanging on a hanger, as we're going to see, but like, then you associate it with her, like, don't even do that. And even when animals are mating, look the other way. And even if a person is full of eyeballs, like the angel of death, and therefore he's full of eyeballs all over and he can't not see stuff. Wow, that's a scary angel. The angel of death is just like full of eyes. That's a kind of scary image. They say about the the angel of death, that he's full of eyes. When a sick person dies, the malachamuves stands above the chole's head, with his sword in his hand, and there is a drop of poison on the tip of the sword. Also, and when the sick person sees the angel of death with all of his eyeballs and his drawn sword with the poison dripping on the tip, Mizdazeh freaks out, and he opens his mouth, and the drop of poison is thrown into the chole's mouth, mimena mace, and that is what and then the chole dies, mimena masriach, the chole then gets putrid, mimena panav morikos, and the chole's, and now the dead person's face gets sallow. I don't know what that means. I assume, in my mind, it means something like pale or something. No, so the Shaila, going back to the Shaila, how could it be that Rabbi Akiva and, how could it be that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel even saw these women bichlal? So Karen Zavas have like, well, they were going around the corner. That's what happened. They were going down the corner, minding their own business. Nobody else was on the street. And then they turned the corner. Oh, there she is, the most beautiful woman. And then they make a broche, and that's what happened. We had said earlier, Seva Shel Isha, Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Afilu Shtuchen al Kotel, right? Let's go weiter for a second. Papa says, Papa of Makir Bar Leib. Papa says, when you recognize who owns it. So basically, if there's a woman that you know, and I guess let's assume she's a beautiful woman, and she has beautiful clothing. So even if the clothing, right, we said, Afilu Shtuchen al Kotel, even if they're just like hanging on a wall or something, she's not wearing them, but it's her clothing, and you know that they belong to her, and you identify that clothing with her, and, I guess it's just not a good thing to just be thinking about some other woman in beautiful clothing. So don't look at that. Amarava Daikanami, the Katoni, Rava says you can also infer it from the beraisa. It says, V'lo bigdei tseva shel isha, right? Dafka says, and not the colorful garments of a woman. It doesn't simply say not colorful garments. It says colorful garments of a woman, meaning of a woman that you recognize, that you know. Shmamina, that's the case. Rav Chisda says, now this halacha only applies to old clothing, but new clothing that she has never yet worn. So if she's never worn them and so you haven't actually seen her in them, so it would not apply to that. Just clothing that she's actually worn before. Okay. Because if you don't say like this, so the Gemara says, and it must be this way, because otherwise, how can a woman give new clothing to a clothing, worker, somebody who, I don't know if they make the clothing or finish making the clothing, but basically the point is, whoever's going to be working on the garments, how would they be able to work on the garments? Because if they belong to a woman and they know who it belongs to, then it would be unallowed, right? So it must be that, well, if they're new and she's never actually worn them before, it's permitted. But then the Gemara says, meh, that's not really a good proof, because by the time I called the Amar of Yehuda, min bimino mutter lahachnes ki mekol b'shvoferis. Hakom istakel. So it says in the Gemara that the whole thing about, well, then how can anybody make the clothing? That's not really a good proof. Why is it not a good proof? Well, because we said earlier that, for example, you don't look at a donkey and a donkeyess when they are mating. Now the thing is, if you're a donkey breeder, you're allowed to mamish force them to do it, grab the donkey's penis and stick it in the donkeyess, and if you're a breeder, you're allowed to do that. But how can you do that? We said you're not even allowed to look at donkeys when they're mating. The answer is, well, if that's his job, it's his job, and you do what you got to do. So therefore, you could technically argue that new clothing is also forbidden. Just if that's your job, it's your job. So it's not necessarily a good proof to prove that new clothing are mutter. Okay, fine. We said earlier, mimena mace. We said a few minutes ago that a person dies by the angel of death dropping a drop of poison into a sick person's mouth. Let's say that this argues on the opinion of Avodah Shmuel. It says Avodah Shmuel, that Avodah Shmuel says that the angel of death told him, if not for the fact that I am sensitive to, meaning that it's important to me, that I care about the basically, God created people, and who am I to just disregard the dignity of God's creations? If not for that fact, have a paraina beis ashchita kebehema, I would just tear open people's throats when I kill them like they were animals. But because God created these human beings, and so I treat them with dignity. And so the point being that it sounds like the Malach HaMavis kills people by a shchita, by a slaughter kind of way, just in a way that is invisible. But however, maybe you could argue that they don't necessarily, you could say that they don't necessarily contradict one another. You can say that, you could say that, right, on the one hand we said that the Malach HaMavis drops a drop of poison into the chole's mouth, and maybe what that does is it goes into the throat, and from the inside kind of cuts the trachea and esophagus so that you don't see it from the outside, but it still is a type of shchita, and it is done that way so as not to tear open the person's throat like an animal. So you could say that they don't necessarily contradict. And we said that from the drop of poison in the chole's mouth, from that it gets putrid. That there's an opinion that says that if you want that the nifter should not get putrid, flip it over on its face, because I guess that way the poison won't get further and further into the body. Okay, so if you flip it over, it will putrefy less. So we had said earlier that nishmarta mikol davar means shleistakel adam beisha no'al. So now we're learning a different pshat here. That a person should not think about women during the day, which will cause him to probably see Kerry at night, and we want to avoid that. Mikan Omer Pinchas ben Yair. And from here it says Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, his famous beraisa that forms the basis of the very well-known book Messilat Yesharim. Torah Mevila de Zehirus, that Torah study brings one towards being careful. That if an avera comes to one's hands, he will say, "This is not for me. Das ist nicht für mir." Zehirus Mevila de Zrizos. And then, once you are careful, you then become sort of proactive, kind of like we're saying over here, right? That a person should avoid thinking of inappropriate things during the day. And by doing so, that will preclude, I guess, that will avoid a scenario where he gets to a place where at night he's going to become a balkari. So by kind of being proactive, you can proactively avoid a negative situation. Zrizas mevile de nekius, and once a person is proactive, so then he becomes clean. Nekius mevile de precious, once a person is clean, so then he will be, I guess he will distance himself from, like, so Rashi says, Af midavar amuter porish, l'hachmer latzmo. Even from permissible things, he will stay away from, to be stringent upon himself. Precious mevile de tahara, and then being precious, like by staying away from, having that like energy of like staying away from things that will make you holy, pure. Tahara mevile de kedusha, and then purity brings one to holiness. Kedusha mevile de anova, holiness brings one to humility. Anova mevile de yiraschet, humility brings one to fear of sin. Yiraschet mevile de chasidis, and then fear of sin brings one to be a chasid, a chusid. Chasidis mevile de ruach hakodesh, and piety, I guess, brings one towards Holy Spirit. Ruach hakodesh mevile de tchias mesim, and Holy Spirit brings one to the resurrection of the dead. Chassidus gedolah mikulon, and piety, Chassidus, is the greatest of them all. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, "Oz dibarta b'chazon chasidecha," that you have spoken with your vision to your Chasidim. So therefore, it must be that Chasidim are the best. But this argues with Rabbi Yehuda ben Levi, Anova gedolah mikulon, that the greatest of all of them is humility. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, "Ruach Hashem Elokim olai yan moshach Hashem osi levaser anovim," that the pasuk says that the Spirit of God is upon me in order to announce to the humble ones. Chasidim lo ne'emar el anovim. It doesn't say chasidim, it says anovim. It says humble ones. Halmata shanova gedolim kulan. So we see that humility is the greatest of all of the characteristics in Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair's beraisa. Okay. In mochilayim v'chulei. So we had said in our mishnah, going back to our mishnah, and with this we conclude today's stop. Going back to our mishnah, we had, so the tanna kamma says, do not sell things that are connected to the ground. You have to cut them first. Rabbi Yehuda says you can sell them under the condition that they be cut. One of the rabbis taught, Mochin loen ilon al menas lokutz v'kotzes de Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that you could sell a tree under the condition that it be cut down. Rabbi Meir Omer ein mochin loen elo kitzutza. Rabbi Meir says, meh, you may only sell if it has already been cut down. Shachas, fodder, al menas ligzos vigozes de Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says the same thing, that when it comes to fodder, you can sell fodder under the condition that it be cut, and then the guy buys it and he cuts it. Rabbi Meir Omer ein mochin lo en elo kizuza. Rabbi Meir says, nope, you have to cut it first. And similarly, kamma, standing stalks of grain. Manaslik tzar v'kosher, the Rabbi Yehuda says, under the condition that they be harvested, and then the Oved Chacham harvests them. Rabbi Meir says, Rabbi Meir, ein mochin elet ktsura. Rabbi Meir says, no, they must first be harvested. We need all three examples. Because if you only have the case of Elon, so I say, well, in Elon, you can keep it standing indefinitely. Doesn't matter. So therefore, I can understand Rabbi Meir's concern there. That I can understand Rabbi Meir's concern there. That the tree might be left for a long time, connected to the ground in the Oved Kuchav bought it. So therefore, I can understand Rabbi Meir's concern, and maybe Rabbi Yehuda actually agrees with Rabbi Meir in that case, that it would have to be cut down. Right? Rabbi Meir, this is where Rabbi Meir says, came into lo posid mashile, that since you can leave the tree there indefinitely, it's not going to get any worse. So I can understand why Rabbi Meir says that you have to cut it down first to avoid to proactively avoid a scenario where it may be kept for a long time connected to the ground after the Kavim has purchased it. Aval kamma. But when it comes to, it says high, but you can switch it for kamma. But when it comes to stalks, the chimashila posid, when it comes to stalks that are ready to be harvested, and the longer you leave it, they're going to become no good. So of course you can assume, arguably, right? So now I can understand Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, who says that you could sell it under the condition that they be harvested, because you're going to have to harvest them. So maybe Rabbi Meir agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe Rabbi Meir agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. And if we only have trees and stalks, mishum de lo yediah shvachayu. So I can understand why in this case Reb Meir says that you would have to cut down the trees and the stalks, because as they stay connected to the ground, it is not clear that they are getting better. Aval shachas the yediah shvachai. When it comes to fodder, I guess the longer you leave it in the ground, I guess the better it gets. So I could be concerned. Wait. So I guess that I'm sorry. In the first cases, I guess Reb Meir. Wait. So one second. Shvachai ema modi de Reb Meir. Yeah. Exactly. That. Okay. So when it comes to the fodder, where it's better for it to stay in the ground, maybe Rabbi Yehuda would agree with Reb Meir that dafka they should have to be harvested first. When it comes to trees and the standing grain, where there's no benefit, or it's not, there's no clear benefit to leaving it in the ground. So I can understand why Rabbi Yehuda says, okay, do it under the condition that you cut it down. But maybe when it comes to fodder, where there's actually a benefit to keep in the ground, we might be more concerned that maybe he's going to keep it for a long time. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda would agree with Rabbi Meir that you'd have to cut it down first. So v'yashminon beha, and if you'd only have the case of the fodder, beha Rabbi Meir, this is where Rabbi Meir says that you have to cut it down of a bahanachim emoji like Rabbi Yehuda, but maybe he would agree with Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to the trees and the and the grain, that maybe you don't have to be so concerned. You can make a condition. So tzricha, you need all of the scenarios. It's a little tricky, but okay. You need all of the scenarios to say that by trees, by grain, and by fodder, Rabbi Meir says you have to cut it down first. Rabbi Yehuda says you could sell it under the condition that it be cut down, and that's fine. What about an animal? We had said, for example, behema daka, a cow, for example. You're not allowed to sell a cow to an Oved Chacham. What if you sell a cow to an Oved Chacham under the condition that he slaughter it? Right, the whole point with the selling, a cow to an Oved Chacham, we're concerned that he's going to leave it around. He's going to do melacha with it on Shabbos. But if it's a chow cow, and he's going to slaughter it right away, it could be okay. So, can you sell a cow to an Oved Chacham under the condition that he slaughter it? Would Rabbi Yehuda say that that's okay? So again, Whosam time amai shai Rabbi Yehuda. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say by the mechuber lekarka, the labishu say kaime v'lomatzi mashilu? I can understand why Rabbi Yehuda says that by the trees and the fodder and the stalks of grain, Rabbi Yehuda says you could sell it under the condition that it be cut down. I can understand that because ultimately it's still in the Yisrael's, it's in the Yid's property. So the Yid's going to be like, yo, you got to come cut it down already, But when it comes to an animal that once it's sold to the Oved Kochavim, the Oved Kochavim's got it now. right? So maybe he'll keep it around for a while, right? So the Bershusa, right? So we come, where am I? But an animal came to Bershusa, maybe he'll leave it around, or maybe it makes no difference. Rabbi Yehuda would say you can make the same condition. Tashma the tanna behema. Amnas lishcha the shochet the Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says the same thing. When it comes to an animal, you could sell it under the condition that it be slaughtered, and that's just fine. Rabbi Meir would say no. You would have to dafka sell a slaughtered animal. Givaldic. All right, well, that was daf chof of mesechta Avodah Zarah. An interesting daf, right? We learned this new mishnah about selling things that are connected to the ground. The machlokas Rabbi Meir, it's in tanna kamma / Rabbi Meir, who says that you have to cut it down first. Rabbi Yehuda says you could sell it under the condition that it be cut down. We talked about the pasuk of lo sichanim, don't give chanoya, don't give chen, don't give matnos chinam. We saw the machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda about can you give a gift to an oved kochavim, and then some other interesting thing halachas, as well as the famous beraisa of Pinchas ben Yair that forms the basis for Messilat Yesharim. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.